I should record that. Hello, everyone. Today is July 3rd, and we have some items on the agenda to discuss. Please follow the code of conduct from the CNCF. So for the agenda today, I have two items I was going to mention briefly for a little bit, and then Mikhail was going to talk a little bit more. So I've been kind of playing around with, so for those that don't know, I've been kind of working on bringing an operator for OpenShift to run Q, and I've been thinking a lot about how we're going to, as we release Q, how can we aid people learning and supporting Q, and been kind of playing around with large language models and seeing how it's actually useful to ask, like, the kind of like what I was thinking would be cool is, let me share my full screen. Like a lot of times these are pretty obvious problems to us because we've been spending a lot of time looking at Q, but with this like troubleshooting, there's quite a lot of steps here, and a lot of times people don't know about the workloads, or they'll say like I've answered support questions from our quality engineers and everything about like how can I tell if a job is not being scheduled and why is it being stuck, and then I have to kind of tell them to go and describe the workload. So what I wanted to see is it possible to kind of streamline this from an assistant, whatever, from a large language model? So I've been playing around with Cursor. I don't know if many of you are familiar with MCP, but let me get my stuff in order. So what I have is
could you zoom in on your?
Yeah, sorry. Too much. So I'm using a project from GitHub called Kubernetes NCP server. This is just a simple, not really simple, but it's basically an MCP tool for viewing pods and custom resources. So when you look at this tool, it kind of tells you what tools are available here, and it kind of allows you to create resources if you specify an API kind and all that, and then you can delete those resources, list them, and you can also view the pods, and it also allows you to install projects and stuff. So what I wanted to show was, how kind of a full flow for this. So let me create a new chat. So I'll say, what cluster am I configured with? And this is calling in the MCP tool, and this kind of just says, hey, you're connected to kind. And just, in this case, it's finding deployments for Q, and going in here. Not working. All right. Yeah, here we go. So now it's saying I have Q, and Q is running. Getting a list. So here you can see it's listing the cluster queues. Now this is all dependent on how you're connected to your cluster. If you were a user, you would not probably be able to do this unless it was set up. But you can see here kind of to show, I already have a cluster running, but I have, this cluster pod, which I'm limiting by pods, and then I have a cluster queue. And so the idea I was thinking, I think you can kind of see, I might have workloads that are gated. So yeah, you can see here, so basically, it checks a deployment, and then it starts looking at the pods, and then I think it will start. It will mention that one of the pods is scheduling gated, mentions for Q, and let's say. and then it kind of like it also has the ability to check for events, and then it kind of yeah, and then it's able to say here, sorry, over here saying like it doesn't have enough quota. I'm limiting on pods, so I am pretty much full on pods, and that's why this one deployment is gated. One other thing I was thinking was fun is to kind of have it generate jobs for me that can actually submit to queue without having to write them. So, can you? So, no. Well, maybe this is different. Has a mind of its own. Uh, so yeah, in this case, I have an example of setting up my script. So maybe this is a little cheating, but so kind of what it's sort of doing is looking at all the local queues and seeing which ones can most likely fit the workload. I can't actually remember if I have more than one. But yeah, I was playing around with just kind of seeing how I can generate jobs with local queues, and also how if it's able to kind of help you figure out what's wrong with your cluster. So with your queue, why your queue jobs are not getting scheduled. What is going on? All right, it's off in the weeds now. Anyway, yeah, and so let me see if I have a job that's suspended. So yeah, you can see here for the sleep job, I can say, so in this case, it's gonna uh, change the user queue and submit. In this case, I'm submitting my local queue. Does this work? Still figuring this out. All right, whatever. Does it work? Yeah, all right. Something's up there. Oh well. Anyway, kind of, it was pretty fun to see. For deployments, I was able to have it kind of generate a deployment, add the queue name in the right place, and then it's able to also detect from both jobs and pods based integrations why things are getting stuck, and then kind of suggest uh, ways to change this. I've played around with this for Copilot, Cursor, and Gemini just to kind of see how they all behave, and it's pretty fun to test them all. That was sort of something I quickly had. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. Yeah, this is fun demo. I am wondering if we can use it to allow or make users learn new features. So, for example, we're working on TRA right now, right? Uh, when that release comes in, I'm wondering what kind of is there any kind of documentation or things that we could do to onboard users onto that feature via um,
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, part of the challenge right now, I'm using frontier models. So, like for Gemini, I think Gemini 2.5 Pro, its knowledge cutoff is January 2025. So, and I believe that the idea there would be fine tuning it, which I don't know if that's fully supported from, like, that gets more into hosting your own models, I believe.
oh
So,
well, I was more hoping that MCP could discover those APIs, and our APIs should have enough documentation on them that then MCP using MCP, the model gets guided towards the usage of those APIs, and then it work out that way. I was more.
Yeah, I mean, so like one idea is, it kind of does learn. So if I say, can you, list me the like if for DRA, this is not going to the one here, but yeah, it's kind of saying, it's able to say here are the other queues, and you could always say like, for DRA, it
Hmm.
will get a little rough because probably it won't know about some of this stuff, but like it does have access, like since it's access to Kubernetes, it can like look at the CRDs, kind of read them and then see how to create them. Now it is trained on some of this data, so it's much better. It's like, for example, like when I was playing around with this, it would say queue is designed for batch jobs. If I say please submit a deployment with using queue, it was telling me, oh, queue is not designed for that, but I'll do it anyway for you.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of like you can tell there's a gap in knowledge from Q as like more features are coming out. Like I don't know how this would work for topology aware scheduling right now, but yeah. And then there is a possibility of creating like an MC. I originally did create an MCP tool for Q, thinking that I would need to, because I was like, oh, I'll just like have these troubleshooting ones. Like if someone says, why is my workload not scheduling or something like that, I'll quickly just have a tool kind of do all the boilerplate, look up the UID and list it. But I didn't need to really do that because like it was figuring it out anyway, just by uh, like checking the events, looking at the label selectors, and figuring it out without an issue. I did create one from an OpenShift side. I have one MCP tool that will gather support logs for Q. I was just like saying like I need to file a support case. We have this concept of a must gather, which will basically gather all of the resources that a person is using for Q and the logs and kind of upload it so engineers or support can find out what's going wrong. And so I had one that was like one reason why I ended up creating an MCP tool for Q as playing around with this to kind of just like streamline that support process.
Okay, makes sense. And then, in your experience of working with this, when you try to debug it, what kind of things it looks at? So it looks at cluster objects and events. Does it look at logs of queue manager?
Uh, I can ask it to. I haven't really gone too far in logs. I think that's quite a lot of context. If it's trying to, I mean, I'm new at all this, but I know that there is like a context limit on these things. So you can't like if I say, hey, give me all the queue controller manager logs and find out what's wrong, I can easily run out of of tokens by just doing that because I think it reads all that. But it does look at pods like this. The Kubernetes tool does allow you to look at the pods of workloads depending on whatever namespace you're in. So it could look at the queue controller manager pods and help there. I didn't have a great idea of like what I would look for in the logs, so I didn't really test that out.
Okay, makes sense. I think where I was going with it was that as an engineer who would work on this project, if I know what kind of things that uh, this tool looks at, then it would, like in my error handling, it will help me, create those kinds of workflow. So it's easier for the tool. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what it kind of goes through. Some of it might just be because it has this access to this documentation, so it does kind of know. Like when I was trained, like if I ask why my job is suspended, it does kind of pretty much regurgitate like most of the stuff. Like, I mean, it's all pretty obvious, but like it will check, a job is suspended, see that queue is there, check events, then check the workload, and then usually that will be fine. And then in some cases, like it might actually go to in other cases, like I've had a couple examples where people were having like the cluster queue was not admitting, and in that case, it was, I can't remember what it did there, but it was looking at the status of the cluster queues to see if there was any issues there. So kind of like workload, queue workload, local queue, cluster queue, and kind of go through that chain and figure out why something's not working. Is kind of what it was doing.
Okay, makes sense. So I think if it finds the errors in the status or event, then it'll likely let users know about it.
Yeah, and Q is really good about putting a lot of this information on the conditions. So it makes it really easy for, I think, the large language model to kind of gather the information. Like if it was in the logs, it gets probably a lot harder. But since like it's in the events, which events can be throttled, it's also in the conditions. So a lot of times it's calling the API, looking at the output, and then seeing stuff that looks suspect.
Awesome. That's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and I had just one small item, and then I'll open the floor for Mikkel. So I've been thinking a little bit about a world where, like, as for those of you that aren't familiar, there's a feature in Kubernetes called in-place pod vertical scaling, where the idea is that you can change pod resources as workloads are running. I had a separate use case come up with a customer or a user, I guess, where they wanted to actually they want to start workloads in a suspended state and then kind of decide whether or not the resources are actually like whether or not they can lower the resources and submit the workload. This is actually blocked in Kubernetes at the moment because even when a job is suspended, you can't change the resources. So I was kind of starting a conversation about in a GitHub issue, kind of about like I think we are probably gonna have to think about pod templates being more mutable than they have been purposely. We had an example with job on a mutable scheduling policy, such as node selectors and scheduling gates. I think scheduling gates are there. Basically, changing like scheduling decisions around node selectors and stuff is fair game for suspend. This was a kept maybe a few years ago now. And so I've been thinking for the 1.34 timeframe, I'd like to try and take a stab at this first KEP, which is allowing for one to change requests and limits when jobs are suspended. I have drafted a KEP on this, and I have an implementation for this, but I'm going to be presenting this to SIG Apps on Monday. I just want to let this group know because I think it does overlap quite a bit with working group batch. And yeah, I'll be curious to hear if you all have any use cases for in-place pod vertical scaling, because I think there's a lot of interest in having this discussion at a higher level, not just like right now that feature is geared towards pods, and most of the time you can't actually use it for workloads. We also can't use it for GPUs at the moment, but that's a separate point. But thinking about for like a batch job, like it would be nice to have people actually be able to use the in-place pod vertical scaling. But I'll be curious if you all hear of any use cases for that. And yeah, that's kind of all I had. Anyway, I have no questions. I'll let Mikhail go next.
Thanks. Actually, I have just like a small agenda item. I was thinking that we have two large initiatives currently going on in Q, which are cross-company initiatives. So, and this is DRA support and work slices, as we call it, basically implementation of CAP 77. And of course, we have the both of the things have already been discussed, like introduced from like the high level design perspective, etc. But now, when it comes to implementation and making progress, the forum is basically like comments, review comments. But I was thinking that maybe uh, we because it's like cross-company collaboration, we don't always have like full context. Let's say that someone is on holiday or someone has other things. At the same time, we have like fixed release schedule that is probably second half of July. So it would be nice to include this this caps this in alpha in the next release or the release after. But my goal is to try to sync with the leaders of the caps so that we can make sure that let's say we minimize risks due to, let's say, just someone not knowing someone else's let's say timeline, or someone is getting stuck with some problem, like basically things that we could sync up during daily meetings within company, that someone is getting stuck. So yeah, some slot like this, like first of all, I would like to hear feedback, like what do you think, because this is a little bit different from what we use these meetings for so far. So far they were like this higher level implementation, like designs, etc. But this is kind of steering them to be more like working group and things on updates. I'm perfectly okay if this is just okay. I'm doing this like in typical Scrum update, right? So very often it's just like 2 sentences. I'm working, or I got stuck, or whatever. But sometimes it's very often very quick. So I'm okay with this format, and that's like a proposal. So at least for we could decide which caps. Like these are the two major initiatives that I have in my mind: DRA and workload slices. But maybe there are others, and if people like this idea, then maybe we could extend. But I initially, yes, approached on Slack Ally and Ilya, and they were interested. So this is like for the word of introduction. If I were to start this kind of thing, then I'm actually looking into both of the PRs. The DRA already approved the design of the cap. And now yeah, the next step will be for me to review the implementation. As for the resize, I already saw the implementation and there is cap ongoing. I'm looking at both of them, and this is actually my one of top priorities. So I will be looking at them like tomorrow and next week pretty extensively. Yeah, so that's for me. I'm yeah, looking forward to hear some feedback about the format and what's on your mind in terms of the thing.
I guess one thing that's kind of always, I mean, I think the sync sounds good. I find it a little difficult getting more involved in the Q community at the moment, just because of like the time zone differences for me, and like even I would like to review more and help, but a lot of times it's difficult to know like where I can help, or like I try to like I have some team members contributing and I help review those, and a lot of times most of the stuff is getting through. So I find like it's a little challenging to how to contribute right now for Q other than kind of just dive right in. And so I don't know. And that's sort of, I mean, for the sync, it's what it sounds like is where like there's a lot of initiatives going on in Q, and it's kind of, I would love to hear more about like how topology aware scheduling is going. Like I think I asked on a comment about like, when like that feature has evolved way more than I remember from the KEP. So so like I find it hard to kind of understand like the overall goal there, and I'm kind of just like looking at the PRs and going, oh yeah, that I guess that's changing now. But I mean, it is what it is. That's the nature of the game. But
Yeah, I guess yeah. My comment would be that with time zones and people being scattered around, almost all, on an open source project that spans multiple companies, almost always some form of asynchronous communication is better, whether it's a dedicated Slack discussion, using a GitHub discussion, just something like a where it's not so sensitive to can I make Thursday at 9 a.m. or 4 p.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning, whatever it is. And you don't want to duplicate discussion that's happening in the issues, but if it's probably more useful to have for the community to have that kind of discussion that's more visible than the 10 people who show up for this call, and because no one's going to watch the recording really, right? And so having a way to have people asynchronously, I'm interested in what's going on with DRA. Oh, I see. Here's the status update. I can ask a question the next day. I think that probably works better. It's slower, right?
yeah, and I think something that Q has done, I've found from the beginning, has done a great job on is having the features called out in like their roadmap for each release. Like I know when I first started with Q, I would take a look at that and see where I could help. And then I'm able to kind of get an idea of, I view it as what work is actually, I'm going to get reviews on. Q's not as bad as like other projects like Kubernetes. But like generally, I find that it's helpful to, in an open source, working on initiatives that people are wanting to review and support. So I think you all have done a good job there. But yeah, I can see having maybe an asynchronous updates about like these features, or even like maybe we could do it from like each release. We kind of have an update on some of these issues that we are calling out as like items for like 0.13, like kind of like who's owning one of those, and kind of give an update there.
Yeah, but I definitely I see the value in having a more focused. Like I read the GitHub fire hose of all the issue comments and stuff, but most people won't, right? And so a way to focus on the two or three major initiatives, so that people who don't want to read 300 emails a day can follow it would be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey everyone, quick comment. So some of you already know me, some of you don't. So I'm one of the members of Michał Woźniak's team at Google. So we actually discussed this week with Michał, like in the context of like two big initiatives, like the DRA, like first version of the DRA and Q integration, and also with like Elastic jobs that could potentially be extended into Elastic like Ray clusters, and jobs that we were discussing, basically like what you, Dave, described, like making like the working groups work a bit more focused, in a sense that there's a lot of these ongoing initiatives. The different companies have different priorities, and it would be good just to exchange like what's the priority for everyone, so that we also know that, for example, someone has contributed like the DRA integration, and that would be like a huge thing for Q. Maybe they have their own priority, their own deadline, maybe they need help. So the goal was not necessarily like to completely change like the format of this meeting, but to maybe find a way to achieve that, so that, for example, like KubeCon NA is slowly coming. Should we say that we're working in Q on the DRA integration? Should we say that we are considering like implementing like Elastic Ray clusters, right? Like so far, like we have only like a series of disconnected PRs, and we don't even know like every single time whether the PR is going to be finished, whether that's a priority for someone or not. So kind of the goal was to just to just make like a little bit of effort to share the priorities, to know what's coming, to internally, even in a very like lightweight way, kind of establish like some kind of internal deadlines for the group, for things which are contributed to. Like that was the main motivation. I'd be curious to hear like what you folks think about this.
Hey, thanks for that context. I think in other working groups, I see, for example, the work group device management, I see that, if we are moving towards a release, there is a quick 5-minute update of all the work that has gone through between the last meeting and this meeting, and review of the board. And then from there, the discussion dives into each initiative and other topics on the agenda. Um, I could see something like that being useful, at least for me as owner of a feature. um, Sharing and having an idea of, the reviewer bandwidth or what kind of timelines I am shooting for. Those kind of things, I'm sure it will be helpful for everyone to keep in sync. So for today I can go. If everyone's on board with this idea, I can volunteer to go.
So if I understand, you mentioned at the beginning that this is the similar format in the other working group that you saw, like 5-minute status report, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I think he said something else though, which is probably important. He said the review of the board, right? So there's something that's tracking the initiatives that's visible, and then you see that gives you the asynchronous way, and it gives people a way to see it if they don't make the call, and then in the call you can use that to drive the, here's the 2 or 3 things I want to talk about, right?
Yeah, that is how I see the device management work group do it. The only side effect of that is somebody has to take care of that review board. So it will be more work for maintainers or anyone who is tracking that. But it helps in both asynchronous as well as doing it on the call.
Yeah, something I've kind of been thinking about. There's been some, maybe not from this group, but from other working groups about like the AI work is really pushing a lot of these SIGs to kind of collaborate more than they probably have been in the past, and things are a lot more fluid than they have been previously. And what I feel is happening is like we have working group batch, and I'm perfectly happy. Like, I view the two major initiatives for this right now are job set and Q, and a very minor one so far it seems is K job. And those are the three like sub projects that we've kind of created, and we've kind of paused a lot of we're not doing a lot of we're not doing too much development in the job API at the moment, but for a while there was a big focus there. And now I see Q and job set, and those are kind of separate not really communities, but like Q is kind of becoming its own community in itself. And sometimes I do wonder, like, working group batch, we could happy to kind of keep facilitating this one. But also part of my point is like we're at 3 years of our working group for batch. And I guess like I don't think we're ever gonna be done. And so I don't know like if we continue, like we can continue this group as is, but also I wonder like Q is its own community in itself, and like it's kind of self-sustaining at this moment. And like I think we can continue using the working group batch, but I also do wonder like, do we want to consider like project boards for Q and job set and other stuff and kind of let them self organize, or do we want to kind of have this be from like the working group batch side?
Okay. I think Kevin, you okay. So just a quick comment maybe to Alai's proposal first about the tracking board. So yeah, I think this could work like asynchronous update. Even if someone cannot attend the meeting, then we could have, I imagine, some section in the document that is like just update on initiative. And even if you don't have time to attend the meeting, you could just put your update or what are like your plans. Okay, I will be out. Please, if you find it's important, please find someone else to take over or whatever. Any kind of message asynchronous, and then we could have like standing agenda point in the meetings to review that. Indeed, there might be a little bit of a work for maintainers or leaders of the working group to maintain that section. But maybe we can try. I don't know how you find it and who would that be to maintain that section, but maybe that's manageable. This is how I imagine that at least. And regarding splitting because this is how I got it, the working group batch into sub communities. I am skeptical about that because maybe job set is already big enough, but K-job isn't for sure. We don't currently like prioritize that much of the development there. So we would need to make arbitrary choices, which project has its own group and which doesn't. And maybe this will also be fluid in the future, like now Q, but maybe, I don't know, maybe we will focus, or some companies will focus attention to other projects in the batch space, or maybe even attention will return to job, Kubernetes job, we never know. So I actually think that this group is at the size that is still okay. I don't know. I don't see need to split it, divide it, or anything.
Yeah, I think it's more been a discussion on the internal side, especially for me from the serving, and there's been mostly on the serving, and I think there's a new working group coming up around like AI, like using AI in Kubernetes effectively, like MCP tools and stuff like that. And so there's always kind of this discussion about which SIG owns these, and some other SIGs have been kind of pushing more for like a SIG AI or a like a, more of like a like a permanent group. But this is kind of it's always been brought up to me about like what I thought about it, because as a working group batch lead, like, you know, these things we know are very fluid. I think the working group batch is working fine. I don't see any reason really to change it. I don't think we're anywhere close to being done. And I think part of the concern with a working group, whenever a working group is started, the question is like, what are the actionable things we can deliver for this, and when can we disband? And in the working group batch, like, I'm feeling like we're kind of not in a state where we can, like, I don't think anyone is saying, well, hey, we're done with Q. we are feature complete and we're moving on. But like, I'm happy to continue like this working group as is and work with all these different groups. Go on, Andre. You've been quiet.
Yeah, guys. I'm just curious, like, did you ever consider to changing this working group to SIG and call it SIG batch? Because overall Kubernetes is still pretty bad for, stateless, stateful workloads, right? Did you ever have these conversations?
Kind of starting it now, but I don't think anyone. It gets weird with SIGs in Kubernetes. It's kind of the problem where a lot of the SIGs own core components in Kubernetes, and I do think I could see a world where like SIG batch or other things get created to kind of. I could see that, but I don't know if I don't really know if anyone's has the interest to start that conversation though. Sounds like everyone's kind of happy with the status quo as is. But
Yeah, because
I
what's what kind of like we see right now, like there are a lot of things which are happening under Kubernetes 6 GitHub org, which is essential to, for Kubernetes success, right? So they probably need to make a switch moving forward.
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
Like, I mean, like, there are many projects, right, which sitting right now not under Kubernetes core API, right? Queue, job sets, autoscaler API, co-scaling, right, plugins. So they're not part of core, but they're essential for Kubernetes success for stateful workloads, AI workloads, HPC workloads, right?
Yeah.
So who owns, this piece of the software is the question. Because working group is temporary, right?
Yeah, so technically it's kind of that's where the weird discussion always happens. But like technically JobSet is owned by SIG and in Q, I think Q is or sponsored, I guess is the term, by SIG scheduling. So I don't know if they're the maintainer, but I don't actually know how that works. But yeah, it's like they kind of sponsor the projects that get created and then people sort of consolidate and work on them. And like there's no part of the challenge is a lot of these SIGs are already doing a lot. So a lot of times, like I think SIGs, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's SIG auto scaling is owned by, there's a separate SIG for that, or sorry, auto scaling and all that is owned by SIG auto scaling. They're the maintainers there. Yeah, JobSet is apps, which is more of like the SIG that's responsible for workload APIs and controllers. And then Q falls more on the scheduling side, so it's under SIG scheduling. It definitely gets more vague with serving, especially with like the inference gateway and the LLMD and all those communities and leader worker set, but similar ideas are there. Like one of those is owned by SIG Network and the other ones are SIG apps, and I don't know. Sorry, this is maybe off topic. What we're going to talk about. I could talk a lot about that one, but yeah, I think that I don't know if like some people have mentioned like a SIG AI, which I think is too vague. I would be happy to have a discussion about SIG batch in the future. If really my feeling would be if people start talking about disbanding like working group batch, I would maybe want to kind of push for something like more permanent, but no one's saying that, and I'm maybe making up a problem that doesn't yet exist. It's like I still think we're still doing a lot of work. We're not nothing's really slowing down. So I don't think anything has to change, and it can be keep as is. Just go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm obviously new to this group, so I'm not going to overstep. What I would do is maybe like I would try to implement like one change, see where it gets us, see whether it's good, bad, and like in my mind, and it might be like a completely like wrong mental model, but the difference between like SIGs and working groups is that SIGs are a bit more formal, and they might have like a bigger scope than a working group, and they have a roadmap, and yeah, it's a bit more organized. Like I would say, if this mental model is at least somewhat like corresponding to what's real, like we could get from a working group into a SIG. Like right now, like what I would propose, and what I guess Michał was also proposed to, like not necessarily like make any like fundamental changes, because as you said, like this working group is moving really fast, Q is moving really fast, but just to make like the work of the group a bit more focused, so that we know about each other's priorities, so that we can actually like share information about like our roadmap, about our plans during conferences and with other SIGs and working groups, especially in the context of like super fast moving like AI world. So that was something that I would propose, to just maybe start with this two-way kind of updates, like both synchronous during this call and asynchronous, like in terms of some board or documentation, and after some time self-reflect and see whether it's a good thing, bad thing, it works or not.
Yeah, that sounds good. And if you all want help, like if we want to add it like to the agenda, I can volunteer to help approve those, and kind of we can keep that. I mean, I'm also happy with the Slack. I think the Slack update is always good too. On all the working group batch calls, I try to steer people towards that Slack to kind of have it like maybe a quicker way than I think diving into the GitHub discussions and issues is once people are fully sold. Like, so I'm happy like with Slack updates, like, and yeah, and like I think what Ali was alluding to was like what I've seen from like work group serving and device management. Not so much device management, but like serving will have different work streams, and so we could say like have a designated time for like Q on this call to kind of give like a status update of like what's going on, but like bi-weekly, and then we can kind of go to the next part of our agenda. And we could do Q and job set for now, and yeah, in terms of where I see the working group going, like at least in job set, and I'm seeing a lot of interest in like DRA APIs, and so I'm seeing a lot more like working group batch working much more closer with device management and kind of pulling these things a little more together than they've kind of been in the past, and that's kind of where like I see it in job set. I think LA is doing a great work, kind of bringing the DRA aspect to this, and like we're kind of getting more aligned altogether, and that's to me like where I see a lot of our work going forward. Unless anyone else thinks differently, please. That's at least that's what I've seen at a high level.
Thanks for volunteering. +1 for me to try the idea of like extending agenda points to review the updates. I don't know. We could have a section like status updates. There could be, I imagine, a couple of points like the major initiatives. I'm not here to decide what are the major, but like you can put whatever initiatives like I imagine. You are interested in, you want to get feedback on, etc. So this would be my imagination on that.
Yeah, it's always a hard one. I think we're all aligned. At least in my area, we know DRA is coming, and we really want to make sure that a lot of the ecosystem is going to support DRA. So that's why I started this conversation. I didn't have time to really see it through like LA does, or not. Sorry, time, but I'm glad that he has stepped up to take that over. And yeah, I think generally that's a lot of the interest is making sure if people start using DRA, and like if they want to use DRA, can they still have some kind of quota management solution like with Q? So I think it's a great initiative because we're seeing more people asking for it, especially as structured parameters is going GA this release. Hopefully, I'm going to see more. We'll see more uptick of this.
Yeah, on that note, I can give a small update of what is going on the DRA front. So I have a draft PR open. I just opened it this morning. The draft PR has a checklist of items for the reviewers. I think there are 4 major items, and I got to 3.5 of it. My plan was to get full to at least 3 of it, but I got little bit delayed due to some incidents. So there's upcoming holidays in the US, so I'll be out for 3 days. I'll be back on Tuesday. But before going off, I think I will try to run an end-to-end of the draft PR that I have open. My request, if somebody is looking at this PR, is to look for overall direction of where this is going. I think a lot of the nits are yet to be fixed. When it is ready, I think we can all fix those details. But yeah, I'd love to get early feedback of the direction that that implementation work is taking.
So cool. That's very good to hear. So that we can work closely on that. I will try to see overall, as you say, needs are at this moment not the focus, but the overall direction. So, but any other like additional eyes, not just mine, would be great and highly appreciated. So if folks from Red Hat also could look into this or other companies, then as we gather here, I think that's like the super important initiative. So yeah, and the more eyes we have on that, the better.
Yeah, I'll just go jump ahead for Yuki. I can help review. I've been kind of working with Ale on this, helping him through it anyway, so I can help review and let you know when it's ready.
Thank you. All right, thank you for your work. Actually, we changed the DRAQ collaboration features as opposed to the previous meeting discussion. So for sure, so I fully understand what is changed point. However, for new reviewer or new newcomer, so can you share the difference point between the previous meeting discussion point and the current new DRA collaboration feature? All right, can you describe something?
Yeah, I can do that. Just give me 1 second to open up that design doc and I can walk through the discussions.
Thank you.
Okay. Would I be able to share my screen? Let me try. I think I'll have to.
I think I gave you co-host. You have access now.
Okay. Is the design document visible?
Yes, maybe you can show it as a file, like maybe
Yeah,
view file.
Yeah. Currently, you shared the Git diff for the.
Diff, yes.
Oh, I think I'm sharing with the wrong tab. Sorry. It's. Yeah, should be better. Okay, so just to recap, what we discussed last time was there was a discussion that the mapping between the resource name and the device class list would be in a cluster scoped object like resource flavor. But during discussions, we found out that there were some shortcomings with that approach. It is mentioned here in the alternative sections. The biggest issue was there was a semantic confusion between so let's say if a cluster admin has two resource flavors and they define GPU resource name, but in one resource flavor they have device class A and B, but in other they have C and D, then the same resource name GPU means different device classes in different resource flavors. So this is not an ideal user experience that we would like to have, because cluster admin then has like a semantic confusion of what they really mean when they say resource name GPU. So in order to avoid that, the latest design now introduces a new CRD called dynamic resource allocation config. This is a namespaced CRD. The system will only reconcile one instance of this CR. The name should be default and it should be in the queue system. But now that queue has a single CR, this means that the meaning of GPUs or meaning of the resources defined here will be consistent across all the resource flavors or cluster quotas defined in the system. So this was the biggest change. I think everything else on how the accounting happens still remains the same.
So one thing, it doesn't make sense to me why it's still namespaced. Why wouldn't you just make it like a non-namespace CRD like cluster queue?
There are some concerns raised that if we ever want to try to create like a multiple installations of queue in the same cluster, then having a cluster scope CRD would hamper that, because essentially the controller manager needs to have a way to look up this CR in its deployed. So that was the only reason why this is namespace.
Yeah, I guess I'm struggling with how do you enforce a singleton on a namespace resource?
We are going to add a webhook validation that other um, any other creation will be blocked by that webhook.
Okay. I'll see. I mean, it's more of implementation detail. Yeah, I'll let other people go.
Okay, so just a quick comment. So this dynamic resource allocation config is allowed us to create only default name in one single namespace. So if they deploy multiple dynamic resource allocation configs with different names, queue control manager does not react to the accepting a default name. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, we were at time, by the way, so maybe, Mikhail, you can get the last word.
Yeah, I was going to ask because for me, like a big difference between like a cluster scope CR and a namespace scope CR is basically access control. So whether it's like the Kubernetes admin who's supposed to be the owner and who's supposed to control this, or whether it's supposed to be users. So is this like, as I understand, like this wouldn't be something like for users to configure, right? But rather it should be the cluster admin.
Yeah, it should be cluster admin, and this is one of the points I raised for this particular idea. But because this is in the queue system namespace, and all of the resources there are in the purview of cluster admin, we should have precedence of the RBAC setup there. So it's not anything new we are introducing here. I'll let other folks go, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, I guess just make sure that the namespace is option, like you can change that one. I know from our case, we don't, we would like to have like a prefix of like OpenShift for like more OpenShift specific namespaces. So like we don't deploy Q in the Q system namespace at all. So just making sure that that is always configurable is important for us.
Yeah, I think we can find a way to plumb that in, like an environment variable or something that comes off from the deployment. Okay.
Yeah. So from my perspective, both approaches should be implementable. I don't have like much of a preference. Both are on par, like making it global or in the Q system namespace. I think the intuition for Q system namespace is that so far in Q, we were putting all the configuration in the config map, which is namespace in the Q system. So this is kind of natural because it's also kind of configuration to put it just in the Q system. And we have precedents for other admin scope, like for admins only CRDs in the Q system namespace. So this should be okay, but if we hit some issues, I believe this aspect of the cap is very easy to change during the implementation either, and I'm totally open to global if we encounter any things that we didn't anticipate. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you, everyone. We're a little bit over. Thanks for a nice discussion as always. And for those of you in the U.S., have a good holiday. For those of you not, hopefully you are taking some time off this summer. Enjoy, and see you all in 2 weeks.
See you guys. Thanks.
Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. See you.